And welcome to this week's edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns with you here on our little studio, STL Sports Page studio. Thanks, of course, to all of our presenting title sponsors here for the weekly podcast, Archwell Health, the Drury Hotels, AAA Travel of Missouri, as well as all of our other sponsors here on the website. All of our Cardinal content, of course, free behind no paywall here. So hopefully you've enjoyed all of our features, all of our game stories, all the audio, as well as this podcast. Mike, before we get started, we have some breaking news. We have to get straight to the Cardinal locker room and manager Ali Marmol after the game on Thursday.
Let's listen up. We won a game yesterday. If we win one today, that's 2 in a row. We win one tomorrow, that's called a winning streak. It has happened before. So let's see some hustle. Let's jack it up a little. I got a feeling things are about to turn around for us.
Of course, that was not Ali Marmol. That was Lou Brown in the iconic 1989 movie Major League. But it could have been Ali after the Cardinals won their second win in a row on Thursday.
Hey, if Lou Brown could turn this team around, then anybody can, right? Maybe this is the spark that we need to get this team going in the right direction. One
of the great baseball movies of all time. I think would behoove a lot of Cardinal fans to watch that movie if they don't remember it, because maybe it is the spark that's going to get this team going. Two wins in a row. Only the second time in August the Cardinals have won 2 games in a row. You got to go all the way back to June before they won 3 games in a row. So they're trying to do that on Friday night in Minnesota against the Twins. But 3-0 win on Thursday. Great game for Miles Michaelis. Probably his best start in the last 2 months. 6 innings, only 2 hits. Both of those were in the first inning. But of course, he gets the no decision as the Cardinals don't score and don't break out of that scoreless game until getting 3 runs in the 7th.
The challenge that we have stated before is that this team needs to find a way to score. But if Miles Michaelis can pitch like that and keep the offense off the board, you give your offense some time to work, right? So when your starting pitching can hold them down like he did today, it was fantastic. You think that things are looking the right direction when you do that?
Well, as long as the Brewers kept walking guys with the bases loaded, it really kind of helped the Cardinals' chances. Of course, they got back in the game on Wednesday night because of that. 2 bases loaded walks in the 9th inning tied the game, and then Arenado's grand slam, of course, won it in the bottom of the 10th, the walk-off win. Big days today for Alec Burleson. He reached bases 4 times, 2 walks, 2 singles. Victor Scott II, a 3-hit day. I think that was both encouraging signs for the offense as well.
The other thing that a lot of people talk about is that, yes, the Brewers walked so many guys with the bases loaded. But I think that's a key for this Cardinals offense is they got to start taking what the other teams are giving to you. Mm-hmm. Don't try to force hits in certain areas that aren't working. And, you can tell when Paul Goldschmidt's not seeing the ball well, and he's chasing that low and away, or Gorman would love to chase that high fastball. And if you can lay off those pitches and take what's coming, you're going to make this seem a lot easier than it should be, right?
And we've talked before about 2 things. We've talked about all season. The Cardinals have had a tendency to score a lot of their runs on home runs. And then the also problem that they've had all season is not getting those key hits with runners in scoring position. So if they're able to start mixing in some of those hits, walks, whatever it takes to get those runners in from second or third and not leave the bases loaded, not leave guys on second or third, I think it will make a difference.
And Chip stated it again today. The Cardinals lead all of Major League Baseball in the highest percentage of their runs coming via the home run. And so when we don't hit home runs, this team tends to struggle a little bit, right? And so when we can start to find ways, whether it's guys getting walked or guys, finding ways to produce hits, that's what we need to do when the home runs aren't working.
Of course, they got the big home run on Wednesday night, Arenado with the walk-off home run. And then, of course, today he got one of the RBIs, the final RBI in that 3-run 7th inning. He's, the numbers may not be what he wanted them to be before this season started, and the home run total was certainly probably, and the RBI total was certainly not probably what he expected them to be. But for the month of August, he's actually got the most hits on anybody on the Cardinals, 23. Also leads his team with 15 RBIs. It's the most RBIs he's had in any month this season. So maybe there is some signs of life from his bat. I mean, the one negative you could say about those 23 hits is that 15 of them, which is 65% of those hits, are singles. But again, if a single can drive in a run, it's probably just almost as good as a home run.
It absolutely is at this point, because we just need base runners, right? I mean, that's been the biggest struggle of this team is getting guys on base. And so, you like to see these younger guys starting to figure it out. You look at Victor Scott today, who had a great day as well. And when they get on base and they start to run and steal bases, then it gives guys like Arenado a chance to, a single bring him home. And that's what he did today. So when you look at Arenado's body of work for the month of August, it's trending the right direction, and it's been going up over the last few days. So if he can continue to do that and other guys start to come through and help out, he can take some pressure off Paul Goldschmidt. Hopefully he can find a way to come through too.
Yeah, of course, the two setup guys, JoJo Romero, Andrew Kittredge, they bridge the gap from Michaelis to Ryan Helsley. Helsley gets his 39th save, leading the major leagues in saves. Another good outing for him. So that's been the key all along, too, with this club. Get that ball to Helsley in the ninth inning with the lead. And more times than not, you've been successful.
And more times than not, it's worked out well, right? And that's the whole key for Helsley is just come in, throw strikes, and do what you're capable of doing. But I think Ollie's also figured out that he can't pitch 2 innings. He's not that kind of guy. And so this year, he's only really let him pitch the 9th inning. It seems to work out a lot better when he figured out that his strength is just 3 outs. Don't try to stretch 4 or 5.
Of course, the Cardinals still have a lot of work ahead of them. The big hill that they have to climb here if they're going to get back in both the division race as well as the wild card race. Even with the 2 wins over the Brewers this week, they're still 10 games out now behind the Brewers in the NL Central, 35 games to play. They're about, I think, between 5 or 5.5 games out, depending on the outcome of Thursday night's games in the wild card race. But they're chasing Atlanta, San Francisco, and the Mets for that 3rd wild card spot. They're right there with the Cubs and Reds. So that competition is going to go all the way down to the end of the season, and the Cardinals are going to have to win more games than they lose, which right now they haven't done. They're 7-12 in August, despite those 2 wins on Wednesday and Thursday. So no time like the present to start putting together that winning streak.
No, as Lou Brown said, we've got to hit one more for that winning streak, right? And so if they can find a way to go pick up 3 in Minnesota, then, you're slowly chipping away and looking at it. And this, these 35 games, they're going to play some of the teams that are ahead of them. So they've got some options there to do well. They've just got to win the other games along that way too.
Of course, Goldschmidt, we mentioned here, you threw off the bat that, of course, this year has not been good for him. And he kind of owned it after Tuesday night's game, or after the Tuesday night's game when he struck out in a key situation. So I think it cost us more games than I've helped us win this year. So he's taking it really hard. But 191 in August is what he's done to this point. And I think everybody would love to see him kind of get it going here the last 6 weeks of the season. But right to this point, there really has not been indication that that's going to happen.
And the biggest question mark is, what do you do right now? With Luke and Baker up here, and with Burleson, do you give Goldie an extra couple days off? Don't send him down, but you just give him a few days to say, hey, rest, regroup, let's try again in a little bit, or do you just keep plugging him out there and hope that as a former MVP candidate and a former MVP winner that he'll get it back and start to go the right direction?
Speaking of being sent down, that, of course, was the biggest news of the week off the field for the Cardinals. 2 roster moves, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday. Tuesday, they optioned Jordan Walker to Memphis, and on Wednesday, optioned Nolan Gorman to Memphis. They're both in the starting lineup tonight, on Thursday night down there for the ball club. There's a look at that starting lineup. Zach Thompson pitching as well. So a lot of familiar names, guys Cardinal fans are familiar with in that lineup. And there's a couple ways to look at the Walker and Gorman thing. I want to start with Walker first. He's a guy that we've covered ever since the draft started in 2020 and know pretty well. And we haven't talked to him since the news here broke about him going back down there. But I have to think he's very disappointed by that. And I think the problem was, and everybody's kind of reporting this in the media that covers the team, John Mozeliak was saying that if Walker came up here, he was going to play. Ali Marmol said that he came up here to play and started against 3 left-handed pitchers that the Cardinals had in that week that he was up here. And that was his intention, was that when Matt Carpenter was ready to come back off the injured list, that Walker would go back to Memphis. I think the problem was that was not fairly communicated to everybody involved. I don't see any problem with saying that up front. I don't see any problem with telling Walker that, because at least he understands the messaging. It's clear picture of, I'm up here for a week because I can help us win these 3 games, which might make the difference between being the 3rd wild card team or not. And he liked his bat better than some of the other options in the outfield in those games. I understand the strategy there. I just didn't feel like the communication was handled well as far as that was concerned. So when he got sent out, it seemed like it was a surprise to everybody.
And I don't want to badmouth anyone when we say this, but it's it's not out of the question to say that the Cardinals have really handled this whole situation poorly with how they've treated him and sent him up and back and forth, and how to, how they develop young outfielders is really kind of taken a question. And a lot of the media and a lot of the fans are starting to look at the front office and say, why are we treating him like this? Why can't we figure out how to get these guys up that can come and play? The question mark to me is why he's coming up against left-handed hitting when he's never hit, or left-handed pitching when he's never hit left-handed pitching. And you've got guys down there, Luke Baker and Thomas Sagasi, that hit left-handed pitching a lot better than he has. So why the need to bring him up for a week and then throw him right back down? And so, I feel like there's a real disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff.
The explanation was, of course, that Walker's an outfielder, and they wanted that left-handed bat against left-handed pitching from an outfielder's position, not from Baker at first base or DH or one of the other infield positions where Sagisi would play. So I think and then, of course, he goes 1 for 11. So it's like I did something wrong, and that's why he gets sent back down. And I think that's got to mess with your confidence. It's got to mess with your, performance at that level. So I think the disconnect happened too, or at least we thought there was a disconnect between the front office and the manager of the club when John Mozeliak is quoted as saying that, if Walker comes up, not like just Walker, but any 22-year-old young player, he wants him to be in the lineup. He doesn't want him sitting on the bench. Well, and then he also talked about the, long term of the next month or so, we're going to have to take a look at some other players and things like that. But I think the focus of the manager is trying to win the ball game today. And, he's not ready to admit that they're out of the race, either one of the division or the wild card spot. And he probably should not admit that. His goal is to get that team fired up to play and to try to win every game. He wants to put the lineup on the team on the field that he thinks has the best chance to win that day. And that's what he thought he was doing with Walker. I just think, had you said that a little more up front, he's coming up for a week, then everybody would have handled it better and know what the situation was.
And that's all fine and good. We want him to try to win the games that are being played today. But for the last month and a half, the team he's putting on the field isn't working. So where's the problem in bringing up somebody like Walker and playing him to see if we can start a spark? And you bring up Luke and Baker, the one at bat he gets is a home run, and then he's sitting down again. So, what are we doing?
Well, and then you get run into the situation with Nolan Gorman, who optioned to Memphis on Wednesday, which I think probably came almost more as a surprise than the Walker situation, because Walker obviously has been back and forth a couple of times. Gorman's been here all year. Obviously has not had a good year, struggled a little bit. Another guy that we followed ever since he got called up. We were in Gwinnett, Georgia, the day he got the news that he was first coming up to the Cardinals a couple of years ago. So a guy that we root for, all the time, but unfortunately has had a really bad year, tendency to strike out, way too much. And the hope is that he goes down there and gets a chance to fix his swing. And Memphis has got a month left of the season, so maybe playing without that pressures of the big league pennant race will help him get on track a little bit. Because I still think, like I do with Walker, that he's got a tremendous amount of talent. He's going to be a very good player in this league for a long time. He just has got to get it figured out.
If they were okay with making this move now, why were they not okay with making this move a month ago and seeing if he could figure out these strikeout issues, the 43% strikeout rate that he's had in the month of August? If he could figure that out, he could come back and be helpful to this club, maybe in a situation where they're playing better because we don't have the strikeouts in the lineup now. To me, the timing of the whole thing just seems odd of why we're okay doing it now, but we weren't okay doing this a month and a half ago.
And I also think part of the problem is that the history of how this club has handled young players, and the fact that you see some other young players who leave the organization and go on and have a lot of success somewhere else. Most recent case in point, Dylan Carlson. He gets traded to Tampa Bay at the deadline. First 14, 15 games at Tampa, he's got 3 home runs, which I think is as many as any Cardinal outfielder has had here since the trade. 9 RBIs, hitting about 250, 260, and just having a better chance to play on a more regular basis. And I think he had some interesting comments. I want to get to. This is a story. Mark Topkin, our friend for a long time, covers the Rays for the Tampa Bay Times, wrote this story about Dylan and after the trade, and some of the comments he made, I think, were pretty, not necessarily alarming, but kind of telling. He said, potential payoff of a change of scenery. Obviously, we all talked about that. The quote from Dylan in the story was, "That's definitely something I'd like." Carlson said, "I do think just being exposed to different ways of thinking and different styles of play and kind of maybe some, I don't know what the term would be, but some more freedom here. I guess it seems like this group really gets along. There's a lot of cohesiveness, and it's encouraging. Carlson has said repeatedly, that was into the quote, and Carlson has said repeatedly he is excited by his new opportunities, and not just because of his initial results, which included the home run and a double in his first 3 games. Part of it is the detailed data and information the Rays provide and how they deliver it, typically framed in a positive approach, focusing first on what a player does well, then working to see what changes could help. Quote, when Dylan quoting here, when things aren't going great, you don't hear those things that you do well as often as maybe you should, Carlson said. Coming here, some of the conversations have been really encouraging and may be that boost or jolt that hopefully helps push us in the right direction, end quote. Another factor in the Rays' track record of taking players who struggled elsewhere and turning them into or back into productive and at times impact players. The quote from Dylan, that made it all that much more encouraging when a team like the Rays, who are known for doing that, Carlson said, it kind of gives you that confidence, that sort of boost that maybe really buy in and find a way to help contribute. I thought some interesting comments from Dylan after he changes scenery and goes to the Tampa Bay Rays.
Some very interesting comments for sure. And the question that we'll never know is, what is the analytics approach that the front office of the Cardinals are telling to their players, right? Are they trying to, give a philosophy that they need players to buy into, or are they trying to buy into what the players are doing and helping them correct that? And, the way we've heard people talk about it, it sounds like the Cardinals are trying to say this is the way we approach hitting. And it sounds like the Rays have a way of, well, how do you approach hitting? Let us see how we can help that.
So it'll be interesting to watch Dylan the rest of this season, as well as years to come, about how that transition works with Tampa Bay. And I think the problem too, you got to be honest, is it wasn't working in St. Louis for whatever reason. He needed a fresh start. You had other players. When he brought in Tommy Pham, other guys were going to take even more playing time away from Dylan. So I think it's a good move for him that he moved on. Hopefully, the guys the Cardinals are counting on will be that impact players, and everybody will be happy as we move forward.
And Dylan's not the first young outfielder that the Rays have developed away from the Cardinals, right? I mean, we all look at Randy Arozarena, and it's kind of a similar situation. He wasn't getting playing time here, and whether it's the video that he shot in the clubhouse that got him traded or what caused that issue, he went to Tampa, got a chance to play, and look what happens, right? So you just wonder if the approach that the Cardinals front office is taking to the analytic numbers is not working anymore. Maybe it's time for a change in that area.
It's going to be interesting to tell. A lot of things could change with this ball club over the last 6 weeks of the season, and of course after the season, depending on how the year goes. So we'll have all that covered for you here on STLSportsPage.com, whatever the news happens to be. The other news of the Cardinals that we have to address, again on a negative standpoint, really, is the attendance at the ballpark the last couple of days. Never before Wednesday night had the Cardinals drawn or an announced attendance of less than 30,000 for a game at Busch Stadium 3 that stayed open in 2006. Now they've had 2 days in a row, Wednesday night and Thursday afternoon, the 2 smallest crowds in the history of that stadium. So are the fans trying to send a message to the ownership group by not showing up at the ballpark? I don't know.
Does the ownership group does that get to them? Do they care, right? What's the right word for that? But, does Bill DeWitt and Bill DeWitt Jr. realize that, hey, there's nobody coming to this game because of the performance that's on the field, and will that change in the offseason?
Well, right now they're on a pace to draw less than 3 million fans, which will be the first time that's happened in St. Louis since 1997. So I think that would get their attention.
And it will be curious to see, getting their attention, what do they decide to do, right? Is it a change in the front office with the manager? Is it a change in the front office with the general manager or some of the analytics staff in the front office? Or does this team all of a sudden click and something happens and they win 15 in a row and you never know what could happen, right?
And I do think the Cardinals have done an awfully good job over the years of selling season tickets as well as group sales tickets. I think it's still a great night to go to the ballpark. I mean, the weather the last 2 days was terrific down at the ballpark. So I think there's still a lot of reasons to go to the ballpark, even if, I remember Chris I wasn't there, but I remember reading about when Chris Vondre owned the ball club, the Browns and everything back way in the 1800s, the turn of the century. He goes, well, come see the other team. They got some pretty good players. So, we're still baseball fans first and foremost, and we're going to go to the ballgame.
And I would much rather be at the ballgame than watch it on TV, because there's always something exciting happening in the ballpark. So that to be said is, from a fan standpoint, I would encourage anyone to go to every game that they can.
The one thing, and it kind of ties into the young players that we've talked about, and this will be something that we follow as the season progresses as well as we get into the offseason, is some of the people in the Cardinal front office are of the opinion that fans would not be interested in a rebuild. That, if you didn't have a Nolan Arenado, if you didn't have a Paul Goldschmidt, if you didn't have, some of the veteran pitchers that you have on this team, the fans would not be as interested in the club. And I don't know that you can make that argument. I think, do we need to tear it down like the Astros did? No, probably not, because you've got an awful lot of good young talent. I think the fans would actually be encouraged by watching a lot of these young players play, knowing that they have a chance to get better and develop, and why they're watching them play at this level. So, and that's why I say that's one of the decisions I think the Cardinals are going to have to make, and whether it's going to be the current ownership group and the current management team that gets that done, or if they're going to look to start over and bring in some fresh blood. It's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. I don't think we've seen that in a long time in this ball club.
The one player that they've treated correct and right through this entire thing is Mason Wynn. They brought him up and they let him play, and they let him work through the errors that he was having last year, right? And they let him kind of figure it out on his own. And he's been one of the bright spots of this entire team all year, and he's fit perfect in that leadoff spot. And so I think a lot of fans would be encouraged by letting some of these young kids play, because another example is look at Victor Scott. When he's starting to play now, he's starting to figure it out, and 3 for 3 today with a stolen base. And so when you start to see some of those pieces, I don't know that it would be a complete rebuild.
No, I don't think it would be. I don't think you're not going to have a number 1 overall draft pick. You got a kid that was picked in the 7th overall spot this year, J.J. Weatherholt, that they're very high on. They've got some really good young pitchers, and Tink Hens, Quinn Matthews, that they're high on. I think there's a lot of reasons why these young players can kind of be the future of this ball club, and maybe it's time to turn it over to them sooner rather than later.
Do you think if we took Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt out of this lineup, this team would be any worse than they are right now?
It's hard to say. I mean, they're definitely the leaders of the team. You don't know what the guys who would take over for them are going to do.
And I don't know what they're doing inside the clubhouse, right? So I can't say to that. I'm just saying, when I look at the numbers that Paul Goldschmidt has put up this year, I don't know why I wouldn't have a problem with Luken Baker, who's got 32 home runs in Memphis, having a shot up here.
And you also got Alec Burleson, who played first base on Thursday. He could probably play first, not to the Gold Glove level that Paul Goldschmidt plays, but maybe he's the difference is what he can do offensively. So it's tough. Older. We've talked before about, and I'll get your comments in a second. We've talked before about the problem is, as a player gets older, sometimes they get old quick, and you just don't know how that's going to happen, and how you handle those players who have been really good, Hall of Fame potential players in their careers, but they just are not as good of players now as they used to be. It's a tough place for a manager and a team to be in.
It's very tough for sure, because I think we can all look back on excluding this year, you look back on the career of Paul Goldschmidt, and there's a potential conversation for the Hall of Fame there, right?
Sure.
And when you look at this year, you would think you're crazy, but when you've got a player like that, you want him to play every day, because you think he's going to get out of the funk that he's in. And nobody hates this worse than he does, right? I can guarantee you that. So you hope that something clicks here soon for him.
Maybe it'll click in Minnesota on Friday night. Cardinals and Twins getting a 3-game interleague series up in Minnesota for the weekend. A reminder that the Friday night game broadcast will be on Apple TV, not on normal Bally's Sports Midwest. So you have to figure out how to get Apple TV. Luckily, Mike's fixed us up so we can watch the game here from our house. But Andre Palante, the schedule started for that first game. It's a tough stretch. You look at, we've talked before about this 22-game stretch that they're kind of now in the middle of, but now you got 13 games left against Minnesota, San Diego, the Yankees again, and then Milwaukee again. Those are combined 72 games over 500. Those teams that you're going to play. The interesting series out of all those to me It starts Monday at Busch Stadium when Mike Schultz and the Padres come to town. That's going to be a really interesting series. Mike Schultz's first trip back to St. Louis in uniform since he became the manager of the Padres, even when he was kind of part-time coach and advisor for that club the last couple of years. When they came to St. Louis, he was not on the road trip, so he has not been back in St. Louis in uniform since he left the Cardinals after the 2021 season.
This schedule does not do the Cardinals any favor, but the other two things that we have failed to mention that are coming very quickly on the horizon that could help this team are very closely is Lance Lynn is very close to coming back, and Steven Matz is very close to coming back. And as we've talked about before, Andre Palante has done a very nice job in this rotation for them. So if you can add two more pitchers back in this rotation, and the way Michael has pitched today, it's not to say it's out of the question for this team to make a wild card spot.
We saw Matz in Memphis when we were down there a week or so ago doing the Luke and Baker story. He had another rehab assignment on Wednesday night, and Ollie Morrell said he's going to probably make one more start. Said that today to the media down at the ballpark that he probably is going to make one more start. He just wants to be assured that he's 100% physically if they're going to count on him for the last part of this season here. He did throw 85 pitches, I think it was, on Wednesday night, so probably looking to get him right about that 90 pitch mark again in that next start. Of course, the rosters can expand. You can add two players on September 1st, so maybe they're kind of targeting that a little bit for some of those additions as well. They also want to get Riley O'Brien back up here as well and see what he can do. Obviously, he hasn't pitched for the Cardinals since opening day when he got hurt, but he is pitching now in the bullpen regularly in Memphis. So, a lot of moving parts that we're going to be paying attention to as this team gets forward, especially as they try to hunt down that wild card playoff spot. That's what you want in September, is to get into September and have a chance. And hopefully the Cardinals will be able to do that.
And the addition of those two guys could be very helpful, right? Because they have both been strong pitchers in their career, and Lance Lynn has been a very nice help to this team all year. So it'd be very helpful to have him back and in a much needed spot in the rotation coming down the stretch.
They have at least floated the idea that they will consider going to a 6-man rotation when those guys are back and ready to pitch. You might even get into a situation where you look at a piggyback start for some of those guys and only try to get, 3 or 4 innings out of them and save some innings a little bit. So a lot of things to be happening, a lot of decisions to be made, and we'll of course have all of it covered for you here on STLSportsPage.com. We'll be back with another edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast next week. Until then, enjoy all of our other coverage. And Mike, thanks for the visit, and we'll talk to everybody again soon here on STLSportsPage.com, Reigns on the Cardinals.